In 2024, Switzerland witnessed the largest flood pattern in history, causing unprecedented damage and leaving a terrifying mark across the country. The floods began with weeks of relentless rain, which pushed rivers and lakes across Switzerland beyond their critical levels. Major rivers such as the Rhine, Aire, and Rhone began to overflow their banks, quickly turning many areas into seas. The floods not only hit low-lying areas but also reached mountainous regions, causing landslides and completely isolating entire villages. The financial center of Switzerland, Zurich, was not spared from the disaster as many neighborhoods were submerged, traffic was paralyzed, and high-rise buildings were exposed to the danger of raging water. Lakeside towns such as Lucerne and Interlaken, famous for their beautiful scenery and tourist attractions, were also submerged in floodwaters, completely disrupting the lives of residents. Bridges and important infrastructure were destroyed, and many railway lines and highways were cut off, making rescue and evacuation efforts extremely difficult. This was not just a normal flood, but a national disaster, forcing thousands of people to evacuate, hundreds of people missing, and causing economic losses of billions of Swiss francs. The Swiss government and people have made every effort to cope with the situation, but the consequences of this flood will have a profound impact on the country for many years to come. The historic floods in Switzerland in 2024 caused a huge loss of life, leaving the entire country in mourning. Hundreds of people were missing in the raging floodwaters, and the death toll rose by the day as rescue teams searched through the rubble and rising waters. Many areas were completely cut off by the floods, making access and rescue extremely difficult. People were trapped on rooftops and in flooded apartments, desperately waiting for help. Among the dead were many families who were swept away while trying to evacuate or find safe shelter. Densely populated areas were severely affected, with many victims being the elderly, children, and those who were unable to escape the fast-approaching floods. Hospitals and medical facilities were overwhelmed by the large number of injured, many of whom were seriously injured by collapsing buildings or being swept away by the floods. The property damage from the historic floods in Switzerland in 2024 was devastating, with billions of dollars lost in just a few days. Cities and towns were inundated with floodwaters, causing extensive damage to homes, infrastructure, and personal property. Thousands of homes were destroyed or severely damaged, leaving many families without their homes and possessions. Floodwaters swept away vehicles, damaged roads, bridges, and buildings, and paralyzed transportation systems on a large scale. Many important economic sectors were also severely affected. Businesses ranging from small shops to large factories were forced to shut down due to the floods, resulting in huge economic losses. Electricity, water, and telecommunications systems were disrupted on a large scale, making it difficult to resume normal life. In addition, the floods also caused great damage to the agricultural sector, with thousands of hectares of farmland submerged and crops completely destroyed. Livestock farms also suffered heavy losses when livestock and poultry were swept away by the floods or died due to lack of food and clean water. The historic floods of 2024 in Switzerland had a severe impact on all forms of transportation, from waterways, roads, to aviation, as well as severely affecting the tourism and catering industries. Waterways were completely paralyzed when major rivers such as the Rhine and Aire flooded, causing ships to be swept away or unable to move. River ports and related transport infrastructure were severely damaged. disrupting freight and passenger transport. Roads were also not spared the disaster when thousands of kilometers of highways and railways were submerged under floodwaters. Many bridges were washed away or severely damaged, paralyzing traffic. Vehicles were stranded. Many vehicles were swept away by floodwaters or damaged beyond repair. Rescue and access to isolated areas became extremely difficult due to the destruction of the transport system. The aviation industry was also hit hard, with many airports closed, flights canceled due to bad weather conditions and damaged airport infrastructure. Both international and domestic travel were severely disrupted, causing chaos and affecting thousands of passengers. Tourism, one of Switzerland's main economic sectors, was severely damaged. Resorts, hotels, and popular tourist destinations such as the Alps were flooded or closed, forcing tourists to cancel their travel plans. The food service industry was also hit hard, with restaurants, cafes, and grocery stores unable to operate due to lack of raw materials, damaged facilities, and disrupted water supplies. The people and authorities were faced with an emergency and acted quickly to minimize the damage. The authorities immediately activated emergency response plans. Rescue teams and civil protection organizations were mobilized to the maximum, with the army and police participating in support. These units quickly deployed rescue teams, evacuated people from dangerous areas, and provided essential supplies such as food, drinking water, and medicine to those affected. Shelters were set up in schools, churches, and other public facilities to receive those who lost their homes. These places were fully equipped to meet the basic needs of the people, from housing, food, to medical assistance. The government also called for support from international organizations, and neighboring countries provided aid in materials and manpower. For their part, people quickly followed the instructions from the authorities, tried to evacuate to safe places, and cooperated with rescue forces. Many communities organized volunteer teams to help each other during the evacuation process, protect their properties, and overcome difficulties together. People living in low-lying areas were warned and prepared in advance, with many families building temporary protection measures, such as blocking water with sandbags and moving their properties to higher ground to avoid damage. After the water receded, authorities and people joined together to deal with the aftermath. Rescue teams were deployed to clean up the rubble, restore transportation and electricity and water systems. Environmental experts were also involved in handling water and soil pollution, preventing outbreaks of diseases caused by floods. The government has pledged to provide financial assistance and recovery programs to those affected, helping them rebuild their lives and restore the economy after the disaster.